Welcome, everyone, to EMDR Chat with Kurt and Michelle. I'm Dr. Curtis Roundson.
And I'm Dr. Michelle Gottlieb, and I am really excited to say, Kurt, we have a guest today.
We do?
We do. I know, surprise. Our guest today is Kelly Hurley. I'm going to let Kelly introduce herself with all the things she's done, because she's done an amazing amount. But I do want y'all to know that Kelly is a trainer for EMDR professional training. It's early in the morning yet, apparently. We have known her for several years, and she is amazing. But Kelly, we're going to be talking about EMDR therapy and DBT. Can you kind of give us some of your background about why we're talking to you about EMDR therapy and DBT?
Absolutely. I'm so happy to be here today. Thank you for letting me come and do this.
You bet.
Part of my interest in combining DBT with EMDR therapy is because originally when I started in this business, that was what I got trained in, was dialectical behavior therapy. I worked for a community mental health agency that had a full protocol program. We did individual DBT, we did group DBT, and we had our clients go through that, clients that were highly suicidal, self-harming, and repeated behaviors of that. So it was very exciting to be able to work with that population and really see the progress and the help that they could get from that. But it was also sometimes discouraging and depressing because as much as we would pour skills into them and even have them do a skills group a second or a third time, they still couldn't use the skills at times when they would get highly emotional, highly dysregulated. And so I was looking for anything and everything that I could think of to put together with DBT to then really help all sides of this. And EMDR therapy dropped in my lap then in 2009. And I got trained in that, and it was really exciting to see how I could do some EMDR therapy with my clients still in a DBT program, and they were getting better and being able to much more easily access the skills I was teaching them. And they were feeling more successful. They were feeling more encouraged. And so I love putting them both together.
And when you talk about skills, Kelly, dialectical behavioral therapy, what kind of skills, just a quick rundown, what kind of skills you teach them when you're doing DBT?
Absolutely. So there's 4 modules in a DBT skills group. There's mindfulness skills. Those are the core skills, and we use that with all of the skills. So we've got to get on board mindfulness and a good mindfulness practice. And then there is distress tolerance, and there is emotion regulation. And again, that intense dysregulation emotion, they need that a lot. And then there's the interpersonal effectiveness skills. So how do I say, ask for things that I want? How do I say no to things I don't want? And those kinds of skills. So really important.
Good.
And one of the things DBT does is it increases that size of their window of tolerance.
Yes, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. And I love that about it. So yeah, they can tell the difference between when do I need to tolerate some distress, but when do I also need to move towards some of my change skills and use that emotion regulation so I can approach problems and not avoid them.
Right. So, and we often talk in EMDR trainings about how important it is that we stay within a client's window of tolerance. And yet sometimes their window of tolerance is, itty bitty. There's almost no window of tolerance. So I can see how putting these two together can be really impactful.
Yes, absolutely.
So when you started doing it, kind of what did you see? How did it work for you when you first started putting it all together?
Well, it was kind of a piecemeal, I do a little bit of DBT and get them into the skills program and get that running. And then I could check with them. And I actually started kind of doing EMDR therapy a little backwards. So the 3-prong protocol, I know we got trained in standard protocol. We always do the past and we do the earliest and the worst first. But I found I couldn't do that. I had to start with something that was a little more current. A lot of times I was working with them on moments when they felt really invalidated in their life, because that would just send them into a tailspin, understandably. Or those moments when they would feel somebody's rejecting me and I'm getting abandoned, and they would get very upset. They would come in quite dysregulated actually into the session. But if I could use some EMDR therapy and start calming them down or helping them regulate and see both sides of this, very dialectical, EMDR therapy helped open up their brains to be able to get them to see both sides and to really see much more clear, much more reality. Oh, wait, I'm not getting abandoned. But it feels scary that the other person pulled away to regulate themselves, and that's why I got set off.
Now, I've used DBT, not only in the preparation phase for EMDR, but, I work with dissociative populations. And one of the things that's great about DBT is after we go through the trauma of a dissociative disorder, these people lack a lot of coping skills other than dissociation. This is where I also find DBT coming in very helpful towards the end of that, teaching them these kinds of skills. So I find it a great resource for what we do.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest symptoms, right, of the 9 symptoms of borderline personality disorder is that paranoia thinking or the dissociative thinking. And so, yes, needing all those additional skills to work with the dissociation symptoms that they use to cope with what's going on in their lives.
So, for those of you who don't know, Kelly is working on a training for us, an advanced training for us that will be up next month live in February. For if you're listening later and you've missed it, it's going to become on demand. And this training is specifically about combining DBT during phase 1 and phase 2. And we've talked a lot, obviously, already about how it might be integrated into phase 2, and I want to talk more about that. But how might you integrate DBT into phase 1, the history-taking phase?
Right, so in history-taking phase and treatment planning phase, this is where the clinician is really trying to think through, after I've done my assessment with the client, and I understand, and whether the person has borderline personality disorder or even depression, anxiety, panic attacks, OCD. I mean, you can see a lot of this stuff with clients and all that comorbidity with those diagnoses. Right? Then how do I take this treatment plan? That can feel really overwhelming to a clinician, seeing all the, dare I use old language, access one kind of diagnoses with, any personality trait kinds of things. And then how do I make a treatment plan out of that? This is going to feel really big and overwhelming. And in some cases, in EMDR therapy language, you may wind up with a couple of different treatment plans, right? You may wind up with a treatment plan for the panic disorder a client has. You may wind up with a different treatment plan for one of the 9 symptoms of the borderline personality disorder. What's getting in your client's way the most? Their feelings and fears of rejection and abandonment? Or is it the rage they act out with? Or is it the dissociation? Like, what is the symptom your client is coming in and struggling with the most? And how can we get a handle on that? So you may wind up with a couple of different treatment plans. And so the exciting thing is, how can I help you get organized with this? I love a good EMDR therapy treatment plan that says start with the first of the worst and then go chronologically through all your list. But with this kind of population, you can't do that quite as well. So, but I want to still help you feel organized and feel like you're on a path somewhere and not feeling just all over the place and trying to follow the client and just doing the crisis of the week. This population can get very much into that. Like, oh, I don't want to deal with that target we opened up last time. Yeah, I've got this new crisis I've got to deal with. Like, I've got this new thing that's really upsetting, and you got to help me with this thing that's totally unrelated in the client's mind. But right. The clinician, right, how can I help seeing how some of those things are related, pair that up, and still work on what we had started last week to get that all cleared out, because it is all part of the same memory network. That is stuff that is linked up and getting triggered, even though the situation this week might have been different than the situation 2 weeks ago or whatever's happening. It's still in that memory network, and helping clients understand that, helping the clinicians really know and understand that so they can communicate that. That's what I really want to help people with this training.
So with the DBT skills on board, the clinician not only is going to be able to conceptualize better the client and what's going on, but better able to work with them. And of course, now I'm hearing this can be used not just in phase 1 and phase 2, but the reprocessing phases as well, it sounds like.
Yes. And I'm hoping we can do more trainings after this one and keep fleshing this out.
Yeah, right. All right. So you talked a little bit about during phase 1 history taking, during the treatment planning, having the skills on board to be able to help them regulate so you can set up whatever plan you need to, whatever treatment plan works for them, and starting wherever they need to. During phase 2 preparation, how do you integrate then? Because I see that as kind of probably the most obvious and the biggest time.
Right, exactly. And also, let me go back to phase 1, the history taking, just for a moment. And I see that too, where clients may come in and they've got this long list of all this stuff that's happened to them. They may have had sexual abuse. They may have lost jobs and got fired from jobs. They may have just extensive histories, and the therapist may feel very overwhelmed by such a long, huge list. But how to help the client stay regulated enough to give enough of a history that they can stay engaged in the treatment. We want to make sure we focus on that. But with phase 2, then yes, tying these together. And we often teach at EMDR professional training that we're going to kind of go back and forth between phase 1 and 2, right? This isn't linear. So we're going to go back and forth between helping the client get prepared, helping them get resourced up. What kind of adaptive information does your client need? Do they need help with that black and white thinking? What kind of resources do they need for that? Have they been abandoned in their life? Have they had some poor attachment in the life? What kind of resources do they need? What kind of loving, connected resources do they need? Whether that's real or fantasy, but what loving people can we put on their team? What adaptive kinds of information can we strengthen and install in that phase 2? So that all plays a really important role. What symbols do they have? And I'm kind of referencing off Leeds and Korn's resource development into installation, thinking through those types of resources that you can help clients strengthen to give them some adaptive information to hold on to when you get to phase 3 through 6.
Cool. Very exciting. Is there a specific population? I mean, I know we tend to think about DBT and people who have borderline personality disorder, but can we expand that out at all?
Yeah, absolutely. Marsha Linehan's original research was working with people with depression. So this can absolutely work with clients who are depressed. And my clients with BPD come in with all kinds of other diagnoses, lots of anxiety. Marsha didn't focus on that in her original research, but since then it's been, hey, which skills can help with anxiety and what other things maybe do we actually need to bring in here and use and help clients with anxiety? Because there are several, especially in the distress tolerance skills, there's a lot of things you could use with clients with anxiety, with panic attacks, with sleep disturbances, nightmares, and sleep is primary. It's one of the things I've gotten used to really assessing up front and trying to keep in mind to track, is their sleep getting any better? Because that sleep and not sleeping well is going to have a huge impact on whether people are recovering, doing well in life, maintaining a job, their health is being maintained. And that's where you're going to get the remittance of BPD. And that's been shown in some longitudinal studies. So,
one thing I was thinking about, when I first was trained in EMDR, it filled in a blank where patients would get to a certain place, but it was like a point of the hill, but they couldn't get over. And I'm curious, what in your own story, you talked a little bit about it in the beginning, but what did you see that EMDR may have filled in that may not have been there before?
Yeah, with DBT alone, for clients especially that meet criteria for PTSD or for remitting, relapsing depression, like they keep going back into these depressive episodes, EMDR therapy was able to help me come in and figure out how to get to the root causes of some of those symptoms. And when I could finally start alleviating some of that, the clients didn't exhibit nearly as many of their BPD symptoms. Some of them might still be there, but they didn't show up nearly as often. When they did show up, they weren't nearly as intense. They could recover much quicker. They could catch themselves when they were starting to react to perceived abandonment and be like, oh, yeah, okay, I see where I got triggered. They were able to use their emotion regulation skills, calm themselves down. They were able to calm down quicker and not invalidate themselves for feeling strong emotions in situations and not feel like other people were going to invalidate that for them. So, yeah, those are some of the things I've been able to see.
Yeah.
For anyone who's listened to this podcast for any length of time, you know that Kurt and I are always about, but is there research? This is research-based. So for the combination of EMDR therapy and DBT, is there research?
There's no official research on the direct combination of these two things. There's ancillary stuff. So you can see where there's Colin Ross put together a proposal for doing that, but I don't know where that's gone. Melanie Harned, who's very much a DBT therapist, and in the DBT world, she did a research study on combining DBT and prolonged exposure much quicker. And I think there's really good extrapolations we could use from her research to show the efficacy of doing DBT therapy with EMDR therapy. Because there was a research study, and maybe Kurt, you can help me with the authors because I didn't look this up before we met, but I've read the research study, and the research study talks about the randomized controlled trial that they did of prolonged exposure in a group of people getting that treatment with EMDR therapy. And then there was also a third group that was the control. And it showed, and everyone in the DBT world, because they're very much married up with prolonged exposure, they showed like, hey, we're clear, prolonged exposure works just as good as EMDR therapy. But if you dive into the full research study, the nuance of it shows that EMDR therapy worked much faster. They didn't have to do nearly as many sessions. Also, prolonged exposure encourages homework. So there was way more hours between sessions clients were spent going over their trauma and listening to recordings of their trauma and those kinds of things, where EMDR therapy, you didn't have to do that. The clients didn't have to do that. And prolonged exposure, there were several dropouts. So the rate of dropout between the two groups there showed some statistical significance there. And so EMDR therapy is showing like clients won't drop out. They'll keep coming. They're encouraged to come back. They're seeing the gains. They're feeling the gains because they're happening faster. Right. So I think there's a lot of evidence that using EMDR therapy with DBT could be good, could be much better in some cases. So.
Yeah, I can't remember the authors either, but I think it was prolonged exposure.
It wasn't FOA, was it?
No, it was.
No, okay.
She developed. She very involved with prolonged exposure, but I think it was also stress inoculation training and EMDR.
That's what I was going to guess, but I couldn't remember for sure. Yeah. And
EMDR did it like 3 to 5 hours as opposed to like 60 with all the homework that they prescribed for other approaches.
Yeah. And just so everyone knows who's listening, we will all remember the authors as soon as we stop the recording.
Absolutely.
So, okay.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. We don't have a lot of time left. Is there anything else, Kelly, that just really important that you want to make sure that we get at least a little bit to today?
Nothing that's coming immediately to mind. I'm just really excited to do this training and help clients with all kinds of different backgrounds, all kinds of different symptoms that they're coming in with, and just start helping them get relief from their trauma, and then be able to act in a skillful way in their lives to be able to feel that growth, feel that maturity. I remember one of my clients said to me at the end, we'd worked together for 3 years, and she said, I feel like you've helped me grow up. I started working with her when she was 25 and we ended when she was 28 years old. And she said, I feel like you grew me up from actually being like 13 to like, I think I get to be 22 now.
I love that. I love that.
You know,
all right. And I want everyone to think about this is like, we all talk about it. I see it on the chat rooms all the time. People saying my client's too fragile, my client's too whatever. I can't do the reprocessing yet. This stuff, this workshop, learning to do DBT and EMDR therapy together is going to help all of those clients that you're like, I'm afraid to do reprocessing with. So educate yourself, whether you do this workshop or whatever. Educate yourself about DBT. These skills are important.
Yeah, one last thing, I want to say what Francine said many years ago, and that is if you want to stabilize your client, desensitize their trauma. Don't keep stabilizing. Yes,
So
this prepares them for that.
Yes.
Right. Thank you very much, Kelly. We appreciate
Kelly,
you taking the time.
Thank you for letting me come in. Thanks.
Absolutely. And as always, there will be a 10% off coupon. It should be in the notes after this when you are listening to it. Thank you for hanging out with us, and we appreciate it.
Yeah. Until next time.